Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to be talking to you about what happens to you after death. So this is going to be a full guide, a full breakdown of the physical life and what impacts where you go when you die, where you go when you die, what the process is, why you come back to Earth, if there's anything that you can do to stop yourself from coming back to a physical form again. And I'm going to break down basically the entire process just so it's real crystal clear for you. If you're new to my channel and you're wondering who the hell is this person talking to me, my name's Ben. I'm a meditation and spiritual teacher. I got into meditation when I was about 6 years old. My dad was a meditation and spiritual teacher himself, and I was taught by him and then another divine master, or a divine master, and he's been my main teacher, is this avatar, this divine master. And he's someone who I still take guidance from now. He still helps me, still teaches me, and I do most of my teaching myself now through my online community, my online school. It's called the Inner Journey School. I'll leave a link in the description for that. It's a place where I teach meditation and spirituality, so if that's of interest, feel free to check it out. So I'm going to break down exactly what happens to you after death and what impacts it. And I want this video to be really raw and authentic. I've just gone through things mentally. I've not got any notes, so I'm going to be kind of just not winging it because I do know this, but I'm going to be sort of letting my heart decide where I want to flow to some degree. So to start with, I want to explain that we live on, of course, this physical plane. So let's put here physical plane. And to simplify things, I'm just going to create a kind of barrier. Now, what I do want to make clear is that when I'm going through this process today, obviously for the sake of explaining it, I have to make distinctions. I have to say, I have to call things a physical body or a soul or the spark of God, and I have to call it the physical plane. I have to call the other planes certain names. But ultimately, I want you to remember that absolutely everything that I'm describing is the divine, ultimately. But in terms of our experience, we always have to take into account the absolute and the relative. So for example, the absolute version of the truth is that you and I are exactly the same. My physical body and your physical body are purely manifestations of the one source, the divine. But on the relative level, you and I have separate bodies. You and I have separate souls. And so I think it's just important that I make that distinction, because and rightly so, there'll be people that would comment and say, isn't everything the divine? And yes, on the absolute level it is, but on the relative level, this process and the distinctions that I'm going to make are important. So on the physical plane, we're all existing now, and we're having an experience, a material experience. So we're actually what many people would say, spiritual beings having a physical experience or a material experience. But the physical plane, or for the physical plane, we have to have a physical body, because that's like the spacesuit that is associated with being in a plane like the physical plane. It's almost like putting on an outfit, a uniform that is associated with that particular plane, that particular level. So to exist in a physical plane, we have to have a physical body. But if you're watching a video like this, you're very aware now, I'm sure, that the physical body is not the real self. It's not the true identity, because the physical body changes. Even scientifically, it's understood that roughly every 7 years, every single cell in the body has been replaced. We go from infanthood or childhood, we go up to our teenage years, we go into our middle age, and then we go into our old age. And the body is changing, it's transforming. So the body is constantly changing. It's not permanent. And in a way, what we're doing on a spiritual journey is we're trying to get to the absolute, permanent, changeless, eternal part of ourselves. That's what we're actually doing. We're kind of peeling away the layers. So when we come to Earth, we initially, or the reason that we came to Earth is because we wanted, as spiritual beings, to have a material experience. as light beings, we wouldn't have had the ability to be able to touch, to be able to taste, to be able to smell. All of the multitude of experiences that we have on this physical plane wouldn't have been possible in our true nature. So we're here, we're having these amazing, amazing experiences. We've evolved all the way up to human beings, which is the highest life form available in terms of the consciousness of a human being. Not the intelligence, but the consciousness. And for many people, just that they may be at the stage where they're perfectly happy at the moment, just having physical experiences, and they have no interest in actually ascending in a spiritual manner. And that is absolutely fine. There's no pressure as such for an individual to have to take to a spiritual path. But if you're watching a video like this again, you've probably had some kind of inner calling, some inner desire. Maybe you had some traumatic event in your life which directed you and turned you into, turned your attention more to, there must be more. And this kind of opened up this spiritual path. Ultimately, everyone has a different entry point, but for many people, that is what happens. And then they take, and you take, to this spiritual path. So you may undertake practices like meditation, prayer, mantra, having a belief in God, whatever it may be. And that enables your consciousness to start to expand. But that's kind of a different story. I'm going to be limiting this to just the life and death cycle and what happens to you. Otherwise, I'll be here for about 2 hours. So ultimately, we're existing in this physical plane, and maybe we go, I don't know, let's say 70 years, and the physical body passes away. So I'll put PD, physical body dies. Physical body dies, and then we end up moving up to this next level of consciousness or plane of existence, which is described as, I've dropped my pen, it's described as the astral plane. The astral plane. Now you may be wondering, well, what part of me is it that goes up and into this astral plane? Well, the forms that we have aren't just limited to the physical form. So I'm going to kind of break down more. I'm not going to go crazy in depth on this, but I'm going to break down a little bit about the forms that we have. So as a human being, we have obviously we've got the body, right? We've got the physical body, and that's like an outfit, a uniform that we put on to be in the physical plane. And when we die, we lose the physical body, but we are still left with what some people would describe as sheaths. And there are various sheaths. There are actually 7 sheaths, but I'm not going to go into all the details about those today because it's not for this video. And these sheaths are often given different names. So depending on the lineage of the teacher or whoever they were taught by, or the language that each teacher prefers to use, you will hear different names for different sheaths. But ultimately, we lose the physical sheath and we are left with all the other various sheaths. But the part of us that is actually reincarnating into a physical body every single time is the soul. So, as many of you will probably know, people will describe beings on earth as being old souls or young souls, or experienced souls or whatever. And what they're actually referring to is this part of us that moves between each various physical body which we will inhabit. So a physical body will pass away and the soul and the sheaths will move up to the astral plane. And in the astral plane, that soul will continue a life on the astral plane, because in a similar way to how the physical plane has a variety of different areas, so there are areas which are affluent and there is a lot of happiness and peace, but equally, as we all know, there are areas within the physical plane which are, war torn and horrendous things are going on, and it's almost like hell on earth. Well, the astral plane has these different types of areas as well. So if you're someone who committed horrible did horrible things in a physical plane, on the physical plane, you're an awful person, murderers, rapists, things of this nature, you would find yourself in, again, another terrible part of the astral plane when you passed away, because that is your karma. You by your own actions are influencing the outcome, of your life. So that type of person would end up in an awful place on the astral plane. If you're a nice person, if you've lived a good life, if you help people, if you've accumulated this good future for yourself in a way, you'll find yourself on a nice part of the astral plane. And you will spend on the astral plane roughly a similar kind of lifespan to that as you would experience in the physical plane. Now, when you go into deep states of meditation, time, the experience of time is totally different. And you'll know this if you've been, you've had a really deep meditation, and you might feel like may have been 45 minutes and you come out of it and it feels like about 10 minutes. You start to move beyond the parameters of time, but you will still experience time in the astral plane. So you will arrive at the astral plane. There will be helpers on the astral plane, and this sounds absolutely wild. It doesn't sound real, but this is, as I'm told by my spiritual master, what happens. There are helpers that will put you into what he described as a deep sleep to allow your consciousness to level out, is probably the only way I could describe it. And you would then exist on the astral plane for roughly a normal lifetime, or what we would consider a normal lifetime on planet Earth. But ultimately, what affects you coming back to the physical plane is, again, based on your karma. So it's almost like on the astral plane, you're waiting for the correct circumstances to align themselves on the physical plane, the right family to come together, the right period in history, all of these karmic events that influence where you're going to end up next time come into alignment. And at that point, when they come into alignment, you reincarnate into your next lifetime. And as I said, what impacts that is based upon your actions on this physical plane. And also, so a big part of that is your desires. And also, as I mentioned, your karma. So what do I mean by this? Ultimately, we have free will, and we can decide what we want to do in our life. And if someone who's on this physical plane, this is just an example, they're what we would perceive, quote unquote, an ordinary person, just having what we would consider a normal life. Maybe they were, they had big aspirations to be a footballer, and they had a good life. They had big aspirations to be a footballer, but never made it. And that desire was always there. It was really strong. Even to the very moment they died, they just wished they could have been a footballer. They will carry that desire on until their next lifetime. And that desire, because of their free will and because of the law of attraction, they're bringing this desire, this thing that they're thinking about, more and more into their reality. That will impact the type of family that they reincarnate into, the type of body that they have, the type of circumstances that are there. So a lot of where we end up on the physical plane, what we do on the physical plane, is going to be based upon desires, unmet desires from the previous lifetime. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's absolutely fine if a being is here ultimately for an experience, a physical experience, and if that's what they want with their free will, then they will bring that existence into their reality when they reincarnate. And obviously, if their desires change, then that's fine too. The outcome of their life will move depending on their desires and all of that sort of stuff. Now, a lot of you might be watching this and listening to me talk and think, oh my God, I've had so many horrible things happen in my life. I must have been a really awful person. And I think it's important for me to remind you all that we all, more than likely, especially again, if you're watching a video like this, will have been here many, many, many times before. Let's say it could be hundreds of times, thousands of times, but for argument's sake, let's say 100 times. Now, when we say I must have been such a bad person. We often forget that it's actually the mind-body entity that may have done bad things. So the mind-body entity is not the real I, but unfortunately, because we have the ability to discern, we will have to, by virtue of the fact of what we do creates karma, we will have to experience what we have put out into the world again with intent. So the mind and body aspect of ourselves kind of causes this trouble, causes good experiences, but equally what some may label as bad experiences. Ultimately, again, at the highest level, they are just experiences. But if we've had 100 lifetimes, the person that we are now is not going to be anything similar to the person we were 20 lifetimes ago, because think how far back in history that would be, based on the fact that, I don't know, the average lifespan of a human being over 100 lifetimes, it could be 30, 40 years. You may have a similar amount of time on the astral plane in terms of like 40 physical years will have passed, and then you reincarnate from the astral plane. So back then, it would have been much more sort of prevalent that people might do awful things to each other because we weren't as evolved and all of that kind of stuff. So there's a lot to take into account, and you should never wallow in self-pity and say, oh, I'm such a bad person, I did all these things because I'm having such a hard time now. We're better off just looking to the future and trying to accept whatever the experiences that we're going through in the current time, but not dwell on what we may or may not have done, right? We always try and... The other thing is that I haven't met a person, there must be people out there, but very few people go through hardship and come out the other side of it and say, I wish I didn't go through that thing. Even if it's awful things like cancer. Like my stepmom, sadly, is going through that at the moment. And she has told me many times, although she doesn't enjoy it, of course, at the time, she said many times, it's made me such a better person. I'm actually grateful for the experience because of what it's done to me, how it's changed me. It's a hard mindset to adopt, but many people, once they've got over the hardship, do think in that way. But yeah, that is the kind of process. So we move from physical body up to the astral plane when we die, and based upon our karma and the kind of desires that we have, we will reincarnate into a physical form again to satisfy and fulfill the desires and the karma from the previous life. So where we can change this, or how we can overcome this, or what we can do to move beyond the astral plane, because there are in fact 11 planes, believe it or not, beyond the astral plane, all higher and higher levels of consciousness, and all, as I mentioned at the start, different vibrational levels of the divine, because everything is the divine. All of this, all of our individual souls, although on the relative level they're separate, all are ultimately manifestations of the divine. So the human being, as I said, has an individual soul, and the individual soul is the thing that has differentiates each person's separate lifetimes, if that makes sense. So all of the various bodies I've inhabited, all of the various lives I've had, the choices I've made, the distinction here is the fact that we all have an individual soul. Now, as spiritual beings, as people like yourself who are maybe what you'd describe as spiritual seekers, you perhaps want to get off of this wheel. Maybe you've got to the point where you're thinking, I enjoy life, I really love my life, but I know there's more. I want to go beyond this now. It doesn't satisfy me. Something in me is pulling me to truth, and I'm searching, I'm seeking. So you're a spiritual seeker like myself. And for us, what we need to start to do is correct our desires and our karma. And this will allow us to break this cycle that's taking place. So this cycle of life and death, or I think they say birth and rebirth in Buddhism, is kind of endless until you get to this point where it is very much endless, until you get to this point where you consciously decide to aspire for more. Because most people are so consumed and conditioned in this physical reality. They think they're the mind and body, and they get consumed with accumulating things in the world, having experiences, doing all of these things. Again, nothing wrong with it, but because of that, they develop a attachment to the body, and they develop desires, and this keeps them in this loop. And because of their desires and their attachment, they bring around similar people, similar experiences, and this whole process continues and continues. Nothing wrong with it, but at some stage we all need to ascend in our level of consciousness and eventually reach divine consciousness. Divine consciousness. What some may call the source, the Paramatman, anything, any terminology you like. We've got to ascend. We've got to get back to where we've come from. This is where we've come from. So on this cycle, we have to start to, or for us to start to ascend, we have to correct our desires and our karma. How do we correct our karma? We can't do anything particular about things that we don't know that we've done. So if in 5 lifetimes ago I did something awful, I don't know that I did that. I will experience that, no doubt, in this lifetime. However, by me doing good things, by me serving, by me being as selfless as I can be, as a nicer person as I can be, and aspiring for divinity, I will naturally offset my karma, my negative karma. Now, there might be some things that I just can't offset for whatever reason, and I will have to bear them. I will have to go through them. And the nice thing is that the greater your level of consciousness, the more you develop as a being, the easier it is for you to deal with these hardships. So, for example, for me, and I mean this with pure humility because I've got many flaws, but because I've been meditating for over 20 years now, I've reached a nice state of mind where most things in life don't rock me. I'm able to remain equanimous. I'm able to ride out different difficulties that life throws at me. Now, I'm sure life will pull the rug from beneath me at some stage, and of course, naturally I will suffer, but it's not happened to me for a long time. And a lot of that is because of the work that I've put in, because I've trained my mind to such an extent, and I've improved my ability to overcome these difficulties. So we all have that capacity, and that makes our karma easier to manage, easier to bear. But as I say, if you were to look at, and this is really simplistic, and I don't want to, people, often when I talk about karma as being good karma, bad karma, people say, oh, there's no such thing as good and bad. I know that on the absolute level, it just is. It's just an experience. But again, on the relative level, it's easy to distinguish good and bad. It helps us to be able to make the right decisions. Good and bad are but skillful or unskillful. So when I say good and bad, if I'm doing things that are not enabling me to ascend to the heights of divinity, that is what I would consider a bad karmic action, or an unskillful karmic action, because it's making me have to come back down here to bear the consequences of my actions. What I would consider, and that's a bad karma. Again, people will always call me out when I say good and bad, but it's just the easiest way to explain it. In Buddhism, they say skillful and unskillful, which is probably a bit more accurate. But good karma is me being selfless. It's me focusing on God, the divine. It's me helping people, not because I want a reward, not because I think, oh, this is going to help me ascend, just because I want to be helpful, just because I want to serve other people. Me making these videos, if I make these videos thinking, oh, I wonder how many views I'm going to get, I wonder how much money I'm going to make from YouTube AdSense, then it affects the purity of the action. But if I was to find myself in a state of mind where I think, I hope this serves, I hope this helps people, I hope this is really good, that's a good action, and that's going to help me to accumulate good karma, bank in the good karma, and it will actually offset the bad karma. So the good karma will sort of take away, for want of a better way of putting it, some of the bad karma. So essentially simplified, be a good person, do good things, don't expect anything in return, don't do things because you want something in return, just do it out of goodness. And that's how we start to become purified, you could say. Now, the second point is desires. If we're only desiring for things within the physical realm, that's all we're going to get. You are the creator. You have the power through the law of attraction and through the law of karma to create your reality. And if you're entangled in the physical realm and you only ever want things within the physical realm, that's what you're going to bring to yourself. Nothing wrong with it, but if you want to ascend into higher planes, if you want to break this cycle, you have to start aspiring to divinity. And divinity is ultimately the epicenter of everything. It's almost like the sun. The physical plane, all of these other planes are almost like the rays of divinity, but the sun itself is the source. That's the epicenter. And the sun, in our analogy, or the divine, it's infinite. But what we're experiencing now is the kind of manifestation of that infinity. We want the changeless part. We want the absolute version. So we start to become more conscious. We start to realize, okay, this body isn't me. This mind, these thoughts I'm having, they all come and go. None of this is me. And we start to aspire for more. We start to aspire for God. We start to bring in prayer. We start to bring in meditation. We start to surround ourselves with people that are going to help us. So people who are also of that same frame of mind. By the law of attraction, you will naturally bring people into your sphere, people who are of a similar state of mind to you, who are of a similar level to you. You will naturally bring them into your life by the law of attraction, because you are now desiring more. So naturally the universe, the genie of the universe says, oh, okay, you're desiring for the divine, are you? Well, this person's going to help you. This situation is going to be useful for you. This practice might be good for you. You'll naturally start to gravitate, or these things, these people will naturally start to gravitate towards you. And this will all help you ascend. And ultimately, once you get to the point where your desires are no longer for earthly things, you're not bothered about accumulating more. You enjoy it. You enjoy your family. You love your family. You love your friends. You love your morning coffee, whatever it might be. But there's no attachment there. You're guided by the divine. You're guided by your higher consciousness, what some people would describe as your higher consciousness. And you're now desiring this consciousness. Naturally, you are going to ascend. So it might be that once you've done this might take several lifetimes to get to the point where you've overcome a lot of the karma, you have refined your desire, your attachment to the physical realm, and you are then ascending. You will then start to move up these various planes. If your aspiration becomes so single-minded, so strong, you constantly are remembering the divine, it's all you want with all your heart, you do as a human being have the ability to realize God in a lifetime, in a single lifetime. And that is what many people would call God realization. And you will bypass all of the other riffraff and you'll just go straight to where you want because of the law of attraction. I'll put law of attraction, which is a legitimate universal law. So if that doesn't happen, if your aspiration isn't that strong, and I've been told that it's very few people actually get to that stage of realizing the divine in a human form, most people will just break free of this physical life-death cycle and they'll move up to these higher planes and they'll gradually continue the process of ascending, eventually realizing God, realizing the source and returning back to where they've come from. So this is kind of an outline, a fairly in-depth guide of what happens to you as a being when you die, and what impacts it, and what you can do to overcome this cycle of life and death. And as I've mentioned many times, there's nothing wrong with it. If you're watching this now and you say, well, I actually do still really want to do a lot of things, that's fine. You're here for a physical experience, and for many of us, it's going to take lifetimes to experience everything that we want to experience and get to the point where we're totally ready to leave. but we can still do work in between. We can still meditate, we can still pray, we can still gradually expand this spiritual interest that we've got until the time is right and we are ready and we'll move beyond the astral plane. So yeah, I'm going to leave it at that for now. Otherwise, I'll be just talking at you for far too long. As I said at the start, if you want to learn more about meditation and spirituality, if you want to learn to connect more with God or the divine, then I have an online school called the Inner Journey School. I'll put a link in the description down below. We have meditation lessons going on through the week, loads of cool sessions. It's an amazing community. Would love to see you inside. But failing that, I'll see you on the next video. Thanks a lot.